Hello, this is Mr. Ferrer speaking, and I'm going to be talking you through case studies, which is part of the A2 course. Now, case studies are important to us in psychology because they study particular individuals, institutions, or events. But the key here is that it's detailed. Now, what that means is that we're actually going to look at the particular individual, institution, or event in a lot more detail than we would with a single snapshot in either some kind of um, experiment or kind of observation. We're going to look at them over time and we're going to try and find out as much as we can because they usually are, it says here, cases that are unusual. And of course, the key to this is going to be greater detail. And that's kind of why we would want to have a look at a particular case study. So we're going to find a particular event and we're going to have a look at it. So years back, there was something like a mass hysteria, and people were kind of looking at a school, which is an institution, and the particular event where it kind of started, and try to work out, is there something specific about this that we can kind of learn from? Or you might look at a particular individual that has had something happen to them that other people haven't had, and see whether they kind of how their functioning has changed, both for the good and for the bad. So I think we all are quite familiar with case studies, and therefore I'm going to try and talk you through these types of things. So one of the things you could argue is that what we're drawing here is a picture of the person using as many of the scientific methods that we can. So it says here, case studies use information from a range of sources. And so therefore interviewing their family, their friends, the person, observing them. And we're going to use anything that's both objective and systematic in our approach in order to find this picture of the individual. So the techniques could be things like interviews, you could observe them, you can give them some kind of tests. You can do any form of experimental method in order to find that information out, in order to draw that particular picture. Once you've gained that picture and you start trying to publish or kind of write about the case study, you're going to organize it as much as you can. And both quantitative and qualitative data will be used in your expression of that particular case study. So of course, the qualitative data will be your written stuff from interviews. It will be kind of collection of kind of photos or videos or anything along those lines. And the quantitative data will be any of the scores that you may have collected. And of course, this means that you would have looked at this person over time. So therefore, it's a longitudinal study to kind of help us understand this. There's some classic examples of case studies. One of the ones that you might have looked at is HM, and I've got a little kind of web page that we can have a look at, which is about HM. It says here, the amnesiac will never forget. So here's the person who had part of his brain kind of removed and subsequently kind of changed kind of how he interacted and what he did. Certainly very kind of fun kind of to look at. He clearly kind of understood that he was often a subject of research, but he couldn't kind of remember kind of any new information regarding to that. So that's a classic example of a case study. Another one you probably would have looked at is Clive Wearing and KF. They lost their short-term memory. This is a picture of Clive Wearing, and you might remember the video where he's kind of got this very kind of enduring kind of getting excited to see his wife, but he can't remember anything about anything really because he can't form kind of new memories. One that you're probably also familiar with is Phineas Gage. He was in an accident, and of course, he had his brain, or he had his kind of whole head damaged, but he had part of his brain kind of damaged by this metal spike that went through him. What I found out recently is most of the time, the pictures that we've seen of him have been reversed because the way that they did pictures of him. Once he kind of recovered from this particular accident, people said that he had changed in many ways, and people like observed him and studied him, and kind of said about his particular behavior. They said that the changes were temporary. What we kind of know is that we can use this type of research now to remove tumors in surgery because of kind of understanding that the brain damage that he would have had and parts of his brain kind of removed that he would have had resulted in him kind of being okay. So you can see how a case study was potentially used kind of to further medical knowledge. Maybe a case study that you haven't heard of much is a person called Jeannie. This is an example of stream privation. She was discovered at 13 having been kind of locked in a room by her father and potentially kind of stopped from kind of making a noise or kind of walking around and things like that. And so she became a topic of kind of great interest to psychologists. And there's a website that you can have a look at called Simply Psychology that gives her information about her. And there's also the Czech twins that's worth having a look at. What you find from Jeannie is that the information that we have about her is that we wanted to find out whether language could still develop because she wasn't allowed to talk. So kind of once the brain has reached a particular point, can she still do this? And so she was studied significantly in terms of this. So you can see these types of case studies are kind of often really, really interesting. So therefore, I'm going to go through the advantages and disadvantages of case studies. We see, for example, that they're rare. We can't, create kind of Phineas Gage or Jeannie, and so therefore they give us examples into something that we wouldn't normally have a look at. And I give the example of Joseph Fritzl. But let's not forget that ultimately I'm collecting data, and it says here rich data. I'm trying to find out as much as I can. So therefore you could say I'm getting to the essence of what it means to be human by kind of studying behavior that we may or may not be familiar with. Continuing the advantages is we see, especially from people like Jeannie and Phineas Gage, that they often challenge existing theories, things that we wouldn't have previously known. Think about that biopsychology case of neuroplasticity, where that woman had half her brain removed, and how the brain kind of changed the structure in order to kind of adjust to this. Jeannie and kind of the work that was done with her and Phineas Gage, we kind of understand a bit more about human behavior that we wouldn't have known before. However, there's clearly going to be disadvantages, and I suppose the key is this whole idea of generalizing. It's not the key. It's not what we do case studies for. So, for example, if I was looking at pupil premium pupils and their access to university within the school, I'm not trying to generalize that to the target population necessarily. I'm looking at these particular individuals and working with them specifically. However, it is obviously a concern that we can't use this for the wider population. Then I suppose one of the biggest issues here is because of things like emotions and ideas being expressed in a particular way, recollection itself is going to be poor, both because we have to try and remember something we can't. I know, for example, in the Jeannie case, we want to ask the father kind of why did he do this, but he kills himself before he even goes to court. And we don't know, he kind of said that she had been kind of retarded, but we don't know if this is the case, whether he's just kind of cruel and unusual, or whether there was other signs that we could kind of work on this. And so we've got to be very wary that people kind of create memories or have false memories, or that it's difficult to kind of draw back on things before and after, because we literally can't understand what's going on. And then, of course, a big issue is going to be bias, both positive and negatively here. So, for example, you could get tired of the particular person that's part of your case study and kind of be annoyed by them. So you could kind of treat them in a particular way, obviously ethically, but you might just kind of, your own opinions might be formed. Think of, things like, it wasn't a case study, but the 44 Thieves, Bowlby worked with those kids. He kind of had a particular feeling about them. But I suppose it's the other way around. Curtis was actually accused of being overly involved in Jeannie's life and was actually taken to court. At one stage, Jeannie actually lived with one of the head psychologists. So there's this whole involvement that you could be over involved with a particular person in a case study and therefore bias in that particular way. But of course, there could be some concerns of ethics, things of confidentiality and protection from harm, for example, invasion of privacy. These are all issues that result in or that are a result of a case study. For example, if the person that I'm studying is a young child, do they really want to be part? Think of that film Home for Maisie that we had a look at. Does she still want to be kind of known to the public after, or when she grows up? Those are issues that we really do need to think about when we are thinking about case studies. So there, I hope you've got a picture of what case studies are. I hope it's useful to you to fill out your workbooks. Starting on page 13, you can fill in the gaps. That's all we need to cover for this particular specification. I hope you all are well. Keep strong. Okay, bye.